Hi, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. It's Edward Nash, Senior Biotechnology Analyst here at Canaccord Genuity. It's my pleasure to have with us today the management team of Liminal BioSciences. Liminal focuses on the rare and orphan disease space, but with a specific focus on those diseases affecting the liver, kidneys, and lungs. And the company also has very strong specific in-house chemistry expertise in the G protein coupled receptor area. The company currently has 2 molecules in clinical development for 6 indications. Riplasm for congenital plasminogen deficiency currently has a BLA under review at the FDA with an amendment expected to file this quarter. I'm very pleased to have Ken Galbraith, the Chief Executive Officer of Liminal BioSciences, as well as Muriel Lordy, the Chief Financial Officer, with us. With that, I will turn it over to you, Ken, to walk us through the story.
Great, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join us, our presentation today at the Canaccord Genuity Growth Conference. I'd like to refer you to our safe harbor statement here regarding forward-looking statements and encourage you to read our SEC filings. So Liminal may be a new name for some of you, as we only commenced trading on NASDAQ about 9 months ago. We're currently an underfollowed, underappreciated biotech that's off the radar and we think undervalued, but we hope to change that with potential milestones that we hope to achieve over the next 2 to 3 quarters that would, if achieved, help transform our company. I was appointed the CEO in April of 2019, and I've worked over the past year to strengthen our financial position, the company leadership, invest in our most promising assets, simplify our business operations, refine our business strategy, and list the company on NASDAQ, which we did late last year. We currently have about 275 employees working in 2 very distinct operations throughout Canada, the UK, and the United States. One is a small molecule therapeutics group working on a novel differentiated approach to treating fibrosis in lung, liver, and kidney disease with a clinical stage asset, Fibrosis. And 2, we have a plasma-based therapeutic business segment known as Prometic, which is developing a product called Riplasm, which represents a near-term commercial opportunity for the company. Due to a shareholder reorganization that occurred in 2019, we have a very concentrated shareholder group currently, with Tomvest and Continence Capital currently owning approximately 85% of our common shares. Our management team has been restructured over the course of the past year with some key additions, bringing substantial drug development experience with them to Liminal. So over the past 12 months, I believe the steps we've taken have really set the stage for what we hope are substantial value-creating events with both a near-term commercial opportunity in Riplasm and a solid R&D pipeline in fibrosis highlighted by Fibrosis. We believe now is an especially good time to be introducing the company to new investors, as the next 3 to 6 months should be eventful for the company. So I'd like to talk a little bit about our current product pipeline at Liminal, which I'll discuss during the course of the presentation. As I said, we have a near-term commercial opportunity with Riplasm, the potential for a very broad antifibrotic clinical development program with Fibrosis, and a growing early-stage R&D pipeline with novel biologic targets at the bottom of the pipeline, which I won't have the chance to talk about today. So first, I'd like to talk about our strategy to focus on fibrosis with our lead clinical stage product, Fibrosis, or I'll call it Feza for short because it's easier to say, formerly known as PBI 4050. Fibrosis, as you know, has very few approved and effective treatments and affects large groups of patients with respiratory, liver, kidney, and other disorders. Due to the complexity of the biological processes driving fibrotic disease, we focused on key multiple pathways with oral small molecules capable of multi-targeting these biologic pathways to seek to halt the progression of, or hopefully in some cases, reverse fibrosis. We focused on such molecules such as Fibrosis with the potential to be of use in multiple therapeutic categories. So based on the work that we've completed over the past year, we have further confirmation that the primary mechanism of action for Feza is twofold, dual agonism of 2 key biologic targets, PPAR-alpha and free fatty acid receptor 1, formerly known as GPR40. Both are well understood, validated targets on their own in respectively modulating lipids and glucose, but we believe Feza is the only compound currently in clinical development with the ability to act in combination as a dual selective agonist of multiple pathways. With the combination and synergy of these two mechanisms within FEZA, we believe this could be a very attractive agent for fibrosis patients in respiratory, liver, and renal diseases. First, talking about free fatty acid receptor 1, it's a well-validated target studied extensively in patients with type 2 diabetes and able to improve glucose control without the risk of hypoglycemia. The first compound developed against FFAR1 in type 2 diabetes was Takeda's 875, which was withdrawn from phase 3 studies due to liver-induced toxicity, which is specific to the structure and binding properties of TAK-875 and not the mechanism of action. Newer compounds, including FEZA, were able to optimize properties through drug design, to reduce the risk of toxicity in chronic dosing. A significant number of pharmaceutical companies have active preclinical programs or early clinical programs on next-generation selective free fatty acid receptor 1 agonists as an exciting approach for type 2 diabetes. Turning now to PPAR agonism, it's a well-established mechanism for the treatment of a variety of metabolic disorders and is a strong rationale as a treatment for fibrotic disease, which has been shown in preclinical models in pulmonary fibrosis, kidney disease, and hepatic fibrosis. Prior clinical studies of PPAR alpha agonists, such as with fenofibrit, generated mixed results with very small studies making conclusions difficult. Pirfenidone is known to be an antagonist ligand for PPAR alpha, and as you know, one of the top-selling agents for IPF. But there's mixed results in other fibrosis studies outside of IPF. Recent research efforts with novel PPAR alpha agonists, including FEZA, have improved the understanding of mechanism and potential safety issues. We believe FEZA is a selective agonist of PPAR alpha based on our in vitro and in vivo activity and lack of typical PPAR gamma agonist-related side effects such as weight gain, fluid retention, renal toxicity, congestive heart failure, etc. So FEZA has been evaluated extensively as shown here in more than 30 different animal models involving 6 different organ systems and has consistently shown significant efficacy in all the models as shown below. Select published data from several of these models is contained on our website to our up-to-date corporate presentation. Given the extensive preclinical data, we believe that evaluation of FEZA as an antifibrotic is warranted in clinical studies in a broad range of therapeutic categories. Early proof of concept clinical studies provided some positive signals and rationale for continuing to pursue FEZA in placebo randomized controlled studies, which are planned. In our phase 2 study in a rare systemic fibrosis disease called Alström syndrome, we saw consistent improvements in liver fibrosis in patients as measured by FibroScan in almost all patients studied. These studies were conducted at a dose of 800 milligrams of FEZA given once daily. In a small open-label clinical study in IPF over a 12-week period, the data signaled some positive activity as monotherapy or in combination with BI's nintedanib as a dose of 800 milligrams once daily. Based on the work conducted over the past year since I've been CEO, we've determined that additional studies, the appropriate dose and dosing regimen should be undertaken prior to proceeding to further clinical development in phase 2. We intend to study higher daily doses of FEZA than the 800 milligrams once daily, which has been previously utilized in clinical studies, as well as regimens for multiple daily doses, both BID and TID, in healthy volunteers. Our long-term animal tox studies provide for daily exposure equivalents up to 2,400 milligrams per day, and current drug studies show that the drug is very tolerable at the doses studied. We'll begin these studies in the UK soon in healthy volunteers shortly, and use the PK analysis, biomarkers, and monitoring of any adverse events to guide the selection of the most appropriate dose of FEZA to study in future clinical trials. This may also include studying a cohort of type 2 diabetes patients with high triglyceride levels to confirm activity of FEZA at the optimal dose via pharmacodynamic markers as shown here. Once we selected a dose from the additional MAD studies, we believe that our preclinical, clinical, and commercial research completed to date supports potential development of FEZA in specific populations of patients with fibrosis of lung, liver, and kidney. As you can see from the slide, our preclinical and current clinical evidence is suggestive of the potential for FEZA as a dual agonist of PPAR alpha and FFAR1 in each of these organ systems. We'll need to confirm these signals in well-controlled, randomized clinical studies in the therapeutic categories we believe we can be successful, and planning for such clinical studies to be initiated is currently ongoing. We'll also continue to review the broader use of Feza in other areas such as inflammatory conditions, skin fibrosis, ocular fibrosis, and treating patients with high triglyceride levels. We do expect to define the full development program for Feza after the completion of the additional multiple ascending dose studies expected to begin shortly. The further study of fezagepras may involve phase 2 studies of duration between 12 to 26 weeks, depending upon the indication, with even potential multiple doses being studied further against placebo or an active control arm. We strongly believe that Feza represents a differentiated and unique approach to treating a complex disease such as fibrosis in patients with broad applicability in multiple therapeutic categories, mainly respiratory, liver, and renal, with the opportunity for a significant therapeutic effect compared to other antifibrotics currently under development. I'd like now to discuss our other key program, our near commercial opportunity in Plasminogen Deficiency, which represents not only a near-term commercial opportunity available to us from a product we developed in our plasma-based therapeutic business, but also there's additional development opportunities in other therapeutic areas in which low plasminogen activity appears to play a role. We're very excited about our upcoming resubmission this quarter of our BLA to the FDA for Ripplizim, which marks a major milestone and substantial tangible progress following my assumption of the CEO role last year. After receiving a complete response letter from FDA in 2018 related to CMC issues, we've worked diligently over the past 2 years to implement and validate additional analytical assays in process controls for our proprietary plasma purification process used in the production of Ripplizim in our internal manufacturing facility in Canada. We expect to receive a priority review for our BLA resubmission, and will again request a priority review voucher based on the rare pediatric designation for this indication and our clinical data to support receipt of that PRV. If approved, the market opportunity in the U.S. for Ripplizim in congenital plasminogen deficiency will be attractive either for us or potentially a commercialization partner to launch in the U.S. Beyond this initial indication, we have new indications for plasminogen to pursue in additional clinical studies, and will also seek opportunities for patient access in foreign markets outside the U.S., which we intend to do with collaboration partners in specific markets with high prevalence for this disease. Now, a little about the disease. Congenital plasminogen deficiency is a rare genetic disease that occurs when the level of plasminogen in the body is absent or very low due to mutations in the plasminogen gene. Patients with this condition tend to be unable to successfully break down fibrin and form fibrous deposits on mucosal membranes throughout the body. Congenital plasminogen deficiency is inherited as an autosomal recessive manner, with individuals inheriting one copy of the abnormal gene from each parent. Individuals who inherit one normal gene and one mutated gene will be carriers of the disease, but not symptomatic. The probability that 2 carrier parents both pass a gene mutation to a child is 25% with each pregnancy. The risk is the same for male and female children, and the disease does cluster in family groups. Signs and symptoms of congenital plasminogen deficiency can vary from one person to another. Initial signs generally present in infants or young children, but no signs of the disease may be apparent until well into adulthood and may be triggered by infection, trauma, or injury. Ligneous conjunctivitis is the most common symptom and occurs when such growth arises in and around the eyelid as shown in the picture, causing a feature known as woody eyes. It's very easy to identify for an ophthalmologist. These lesions can cause tears in the cornea, scarring, and eventually loss of vision. Growths are also common on gums and can lead to dental deformation, loss of teeth, easy to identify for a periodontal specialist. As a multiple systemic disease, lesions can affect mucosal membranes of the middle ear, the nose, the throat, larynx, vocal cords, GI tract, respiratory tract, and female genital tract. Severe complications can manifest if these lesions are left untreated. These may include loss of hearing, loss of sight, dentition, recurrent pneumonia, airway obstruction, urethral obstruction, infertility in women, and even death. Diagnosis is based upon characteristic symptoms of plasminogen deficiency and family medical history. Specific clinical laboratory tests can confirm diagnosis by measuring activity levels of plasminogen in blood, which are readily available. Molecular genetic testing to detect alterations in the plasminogen gene are available at specialized diagnostic laboratories. So as shown here, existing medical and surgical treatments are limited, have not been consistently effective, and there's currently no standard treatment protocol for patients with congenital plasminogen deficiency. We believe that concentrated plasminogen replacement therapy in patients for congenital plasminogen deficiency could offer hope to patients as the first FDA-approved treatment if granted by FDA. Riplizum is prepared as a lyophilized form reconstituted at home for IV injection by the patient, a trained parent, or a home support nurse. Patients may receive between 20 and 40 doses at home over a 12-week time period, followed with possible dose continuation or maintenance therapy for certain patient populations. We previously conducted our pivotal study ending in 2018 in 6 pediatric and 9 adult patients recruited at 2 specialty treatment centers in Indiana and Oslo, Norway. Patients were dosed with Riplizum several times per week for 48 weeks, with patients in the U.S. portion of the study being eligible for continued therapy beyond 48 weeks in a compassionate use program. Primary endpoints were first to achieve a targeted increase of at least 10% in plasma level, in level of plasminogen in patients prior to the next infusion, which we call the trough level, from baseline through 12 weeks of treatment. And second, to have a significant resolution of lesions, which was defined as 50% of the lesions in 50% of the patients after 48 weeks of therapy. As you can see from our results, they were better than expected. On the efficacy on the right, 73% of patients had a significant resolution of lesions after just 12 weeks of therapy. And 14 out of 15 patients in the study had an improved or maintained quality of life at 48 weeks of study. Based on the achievement of both primary endpoints in 100% of the patients in our pivotal study, Riplizum may help rapidly control and reduce fibrous lesions and may be administered over an extended time period to prevent recurrence of lesions or new growths from occurring. Physicians can easily monitor PK levels of plasminogen and patient response with the option of modifying frequency of dosing for optimal efficacy. Plasminogen activity levels remain elevated for all patients above baseline between 12 and 48 weeks, despite reductions in dosing as chosen by the investigators. On the left, you'll see the safety profile. Treatment is well tolerated to date. There were no deaths or discontinuations in the phase 3 study. All recorded adverse events were mild in severity in both pediatric and adult patients. So we believe that a reasonable sized commercial infrastructure in the US, which we could build ourselves or access from a third party in a marketing collaboration, would be sufficient given the focused nature of treating and diagnosing this patient population and the size of the initial indication. We believe that up to 1,000 patients with congenital plasminogen deficiency currently exist in the US who could be treated and then be candidates for Riplizum if approved by the FDA. Of course, rare diseases without an effective treatment often go unrecognized or misdiagnosed, making it difficult to determine the prevalence of the disease in general population, and usually it's found to be larger. We're currently working with groups in the U.S. as well as doing our own work to identify patients who may benefit from Riplizum if and when approved by FDA. A variety of patient registry and patient advocacy efforts are currently ongoing in the U.S. and ex-U.S. markets. In ex-U.S. markets, which are much more substantial in the U.S., we expect to form collaborations with third parties in selected markets to provide future access to Riplizum, either based on the potential FDA approval or potentially also with additional local clinical studies that may be required in certain of those ex-U.S. markets. Also, we're currently planning additional clinical studies that we would propose to commence in 2021 if Riplizum is approved by FDA, both in patient populations with plasminogen deficiency, as well as other populations with low levels of plasminogen activity from other conditions. The company has previously been granted orphan drug designation and rare pediatric designation for Riplizum by the FDA in the treatment of congenital plasminogen deficiency. Our earliest U.S. patent does not expire until 2035, without any potentially available patent term extension or restoration that may be available to us. And finally, just a short corporate overview before I finish. We have a very experienced management team with an appropriate mix of longer-term employees and those who are new to Liminal who bring substantial and successful experience in drug development and commercialization. Some of them are shown here. We have enjoyed a strong financial support from our current majority shareholder, Tomvest, and Consonance Capital, our second largest shareholder, since their initial investment in April 2019. While we anticipate our current working capital position and available line of credit should fund our continuing operations in the near term, We do continue to evaluate a variety of financing strategies to extend our cash runway, including a combination of public and private equity offerings, debt financing, strategic collaborations for either Ripplizum or Fezagepraz, business and asset divestitures, monetization of our PRV, should one be granted by FDA, for the Ripplizum BLA, and grant funding. So just a few words about our work to date with opportunities with the Plasma Alliance for COVID-19. We do have a number of capabilities and assets that may be helpful in finding effective treatments for patients infected with COVID-19, and we are continuing to evaluate how we can collaborate with others in the fight against the virus in the global pandemic. Finally, these are the key milestones that we're working hard to achieve over 2020 and 2021, as shown on the slide, with our upcoming BLA resubmission in Q3 2020 being an important event for the company, as well as the initiation of the additional MAD clinical studies for Feza, which we expect to start this year. As discussed earlier, the next 3 to 6 months are very eventful for both of our key business units. And just to summarize, as I said at the outset, we spent the last year with our 2 largest shareholders recalibrating the company's strategy and the expected R&D and commercial investments. In summary, we have a novel differentiated approach to treating the complex biology of fibrotic disease in multiple organ systems, a unique near-term commercial asset in Ripplizum if FDA approval is granted, a strategy to build a broader portfolio of novel small molecules over time, which I didn't have time to talk about today, and opportunities for collaborations in both our small molecule development programs and for Ripplizum. We do expect that successful execution of our key business goals over the next 2 to 3 quarters in both businesses will help transform the company and provide a solid base for continued growth in 2020 and 2021. So thanks very much for your time and attention today, and look forward to answering any questions you might have.
Thanks so much for that overview. I wanted to ask, first of all, because obviously this is the near-term potential revenue generator for you with Ripplizum, just 2 things on that. One is it's been a while for that BLA to get resubmitted, and was that because the CMC issue was a compounded issue, or was this because of at the same time really there was a management change within Liminal? Just kind of maybe you could just walk us through that a little bit, and then also I know you talked about several financing options, but if the BLA is accepted and you move forward, clearly you're going to need, I would think at this point, more funding to be able, near term, to be able to launch that drug. So that would be more of an imminent fundraising issue for you, correct?
Yeah, let me handle both of those. So we had a CRL in April 2018 strictly for CMC reasons. We had a good Type C meeting as a follow-up with FDA in the fall of 2018. They laid out very clearly all the things we needed to do to clear the deficiencies which were noted in the CRL. And we've been working very hard with internal and external folks before I arrived to resolve those issues. The time frame was almost 2 years to solve those issues from the time we started in the fall of 2018, primarily because we had to go back to ground zero with the CMC module of BLA, back to validating new analytical methods, making sure we had picked the right assays as requested by FDA, and then we had to restart the process all over again and redo all of our qualification batches, both for drug substance internally, drug product, which is done at a contract site in Baltimore owned by Emergent, and do all of that, and then wait for our 6-month stability to come off for the drug product. So unfortunately in CMC, there's not many ways that you can take to shortcut that process. And we need to invest to make sure that we responded to every deficiency noted. So our complete response to the complete response letter will be complete. And that's what we had to do. So we've done that. It was a 2-year process, $100 million manufacturing investment. We also at the same time changed not only the CEO, but changed substantially management in the quality, regulatory, and management organization to get a lot more experience in that group. And we have a much more experienced group this time who's working on this BLA, including a new head of regulatory and quality. At the same time, over that 2-year period, we were able to develop substantially more clinical data from use of the drug, not just in our clinical study, but in our compassionate use and named patient exception program. So our clinical module is actually broader, and we're going to include that in the BLA to hopefully ensure that we get the broadest label possible from FDA with all the data we have on safety and efficacy from that. So hopefully that's of value. So that was unfortunate to have to go through that process, but we think we've done a good job. It did prevent us from continuing with some of the other applications that we were looking at. So some of the other clinical indications that we wanted to pursue for low plasminogen levels beyond congenital, we couldn't do because our capital was geared towards the manufacturing investment necessary to get back to this point. But fortunately, we're back at this point, which is great. We expect to file this quarter, which means our PDUFA should be in Q1 next year. We've had discussions with folks about global marketing rights to Ripplizum, U.S. marketing rights to Ripplizum, ex-U.S. rights. We still have those discussions underway. I think last year we had a lot of those discussions. I think right now as a company, we're potentially 6 months away from having a commercial asset we could launch ourselves in the U.S. And we think it's a very attractive asset for us in the U.S. market to use as a commercial entry. So if we're able to have the capital and get the talent in the company to do that, that'd be primarily our first choice. Outside the U.S., the prevalence is in countries where it's hard for us to operate directly. So populations in Turkey is a very substantial market, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Korea, Japan. So those markets are too difficult for us to operate on our own, so we'll work with partners there. So that's where the prevalence of the disease is. But in the U.S., we could certainly do a great job with this product, make it available to patients, and make it a really good growing business for ourselves just based around that one product. Obviously, once we get to BLA approval, our financing options will grow dramatically. And given the current capital markets for equity, debt, synthetic royalty, monetization of PRV, we have a whole host of different financing options in front of us, and we'll pick the ones that are right to fund the Ripplizum launch and fund Feza going forward, which may include collaborations as well. And we'll make sure that we fund both of those businesses the way they need to be funded to be successful in a capital structure that's a good mix between equity collaborations, debt-like structures, and asset sales to build a company longer term. So I think with the capital markets being so good, not just in equity, but overall for healthcare, having an approved drug that you could launch yourself in the U.S. for a disease where there's no other treatment and you've got a good exclusivity for a long time period, those things, there's financing available to do that if that's what we choose to do to make sure we get a good return on that investment.
Fantastic. Thank you guys again so much. This was a great overview, and we look forward to getting positive news back on the BLA filing. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.